Bill Duvall.
Hey, how are you? Good to see you.
Have a blessed evening.
Thank you. Take care.
Hey, George. How are you? I always do, but thank you.
It wasn't a full house, you probably have heard, right? Last Thursday, you probably got a full house, the ball was on the ground.
I got to talk with everybody. The clock got away from me. Welcome, everybody, for being with us. This is a public meeting, so we can talk about something that this council is going to have to make a decision on this Thursday night. It's called Bill HB 581, and Danny's going to take a few minutes to cover the details as we know it. And then at the end, anybody who wants to speak will be able to. Everybody will have 3 minutes. And anyone can only come up one time. So 3 minutes and one time. So if you got 5 or 10, narrow it down while we're talking. Danny, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We'll turn it now over to the city manager, Danny Roberts.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before you use the second of the 3 public hearings for House Bill 581 with the intent to opt out, as discussed last Thursday, this will just be an overview of what we talked about then. And then I'll go through the slides here. But as you all know, House Bill 581 went into effect January 1 of this year. Its intent was to cap the rate of your home value to a 3% maximum based on the CPI. Also changed the law where you could actually do another special purpose tax called a FLOST. Currently we is limited, now they allow 2. If any entity within your county opts out, then you're not eligible for the FLOST. Next slide, go. So that's what I was talking about, the FLOST. FLOST is a floating local option homestead tax. It's used to offset the property tax. Like I said, it's either all or none, so if one county or one entity in Walton County or Gwinnett County opts out, then it affects all of us, where we cannot be allowed. If we were, it would have to go before a referendum to the voters, and it would have to be approved, sort of like the T-SPLOST or local SPLOST or a loss that we did in 2022. It would be a 5-year deal through an I.G.A., and that breaks up the percentages of who gets what within the county. The opt-out phase closes March 1st, 2025. I know we talked about the intent of maybe they're going to extend it. As of now, we do not know. All we know is the state law says March 1st, 2025. If you do not opt out, you're automatically opt-in forever. Some of the big things this bill does is, next slide, Colin. This comes from the GMA and the ACCG talking points. Next slide. What this does, it takes the decision from the local legislation to the state legislation as far as the valuation of the homes. It does that FLOST again I've talked about, and then the appraisal values on commercial, anything but homestead will still be currently like it is, except for they wouldn't have that 3% like a homestead property would. So that's where it would shift the tax burden to the commercial property, the residential, the rental properties, anything non-homestead. That's what that third bullet point says there. Next slide. This slide just shows you that the first couple of years it would not be a large impact to the city of Loganville if we were to opt in, but however, long term it would put more increase on the millage rate, because we, like I said Monday in great detail, we are heavily dependent on the residential property tax because we are a bedroom community. And you can see there it does, it would affect the millage rate potentially down the road. That's something that local legislation would have to make up that revenue somehow, either by millage rate or other revenue that we may be able to control. But property tax is the single largest revenue for the general budget. Next slide. Here's FLOST. It's kind of a mute point because every local city in Walton is intent to opt out. I don't think anyone has actually voted yet, but I think they're still having their hearings. Last I heard, half of the Gwinnett cities were intent to opt out. Gwinnett County is intent to opt out. Walton County is intent to opt out. So it would not be eligible if one of those actually approved to opt out. But that is part of the bill. Next slide.
Ma'am, I thought Lawrenceville opted in, and if Gwinnett County opts out, what will that do?
They could not be eligible for a flossed, a floating local
They
homestead.
could still opt in, obviously, yeah.
Yeah, they just wouldn't be eligible for that 1% sales.
Kinda odd they did that way.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So local control, initially what this would cost the city on the first year would be $89,684, and that could increase decades down the road if this bill was not to change. We have no idea if it will or will not change. I can just tell you what the law says now. The tax burden does shift to commercial properties and the rental properties or any non-homestead. So third point, you'd be put in a situation where either you're gonna have to make that revenue up or do something to offset the loss of revenue. And the way to do that is to affect the millage rate. So, like I said, Monday night or last Thursday, with all the reassessed value, we've reduced the millage rate since 2018 to offset that reassessed value. New growth does not count towards that. Opting out is a permanent decision, or opting in, either way, is a permanent decision. Next slide. This is what it would cost the city if it was to happen in 2021. This is from the Walton County Tax Assessor's Office. These are their numbers. As you can see, the top number, that 48.1%, 52.1, and 47.5 is the percentage of the property tax that we get just from this one section of the digest. This is the homestead properties only here. This does not include any other value. The total digest for Walton County for the city of Loganville, you can see is in the third column, 493,581,642,000,000. That is the total digest, and of that, you can see the percentage that makes it up. Well, almost half of our digest is residential property. And you can see what the cost would be over versus what we collected, what it would be at a 3% max. Of course, that number goes up if they don't have that 3%. Yes, Mayor?
Could Kyle raise this slide up so they can see that bottom number?
Yep.
This is what it would have cost Loganville, according to the tax assessment's office, if this had been in effect the last 3 years.
Yep. It's 2,311,000. Next slide. Alternative, what I would put before the city council, we talked about this, last council meeting was increasing the local homestead exemption. We're one of only no county or cities in Walton County that currently offers a homestead. We offer a $2,000 homestead exemption. The mayor and council asked back last month to look at 5,000, 10,000, but we soon agreed 5,000 was probably the number that would be more manageable. So currently, as of right now, at $5,000, it would cost $129,459 for the first year. More homestead properties go up, more that number goes up. Less we have, less that number goes up. But that's based on last week's numbers from the digest. If you register your property with the county, it automatically registers it with the city as far as your homestead. If you do not have homestead, I would strongly encourage you to get homestead on your property because it locks it in. This bill locks you in at 2024 number forever, unless you sell the property. Then it bases on that number when it goes up. Any questions so far?
I don't know if you want me to wait till the end, but I had a citizen that was here last Thursday, and they went home and pulled up the GMA frequently asked questions about the House bill. They called me. I don't know the answer, so can I read the question and the answer from GMA and have you expound on that?
I will try.
Okay. So it was question number 14, and it says, if my local government, which is us, opts out of House Bill 581, floating homestead exemption, and our legislative delegation disagrees with our decision, can they take action to mandate the floating homestead exemption on my local government? And the answer was, If your local government opts out of House Bill 581, floating homestead exemption, and your legislative delegation disagrees with that decision, your local delegation can pass a local act to impose a floating homestead exemption within the jurisdiction. House Bill 581 has not changed the ability of the legislature to create a specific homestead exemption for local governments. This local act would be subject to a 2/3 vote in the General Assembly and approval by the voters in a local referendum. If the referendum is successful, then your local government would be subject to the homestead exemption provided for in the local act, even though you opted out of the House Bill 581 exemption. Note, a local government could elect to opt out of the House Bill 581 exemption and ask their local delegation to proceed with a more customized version of the homestead exemption. Now, a bunch of lawyers wrote that, and I don't know what to say to him. I have no idea, Paul.
That is essentially what y'all been talking about on the $5,000 exemption. All that is your local delegation, who, I don't know who all your local delegation is, but I know that Representative Martinez is one of them. But whoever represents the city at both the state Senate and the state House, they can always pass local legislation to control your taxes. But those taxes are, that local legislation does require 2/3 supermajority referendum approval by the voters. So to answer your question, what is that question and answer saying? It's saying exactly what the $5,000 homestead exemption is that we were talking about. Y'all have a $2,000 homestead exemption for City of Loganville taxes. It's been on the books since the 70s. And it's been there since the 70s, and this just has been. To change that, the mayor would write a letter to the local delegation asking them to introduce legislation to institute some sort of different homestead exemption or tax saving mechanism on property taxes. And if local legislation, if the local delegation chose to do that, then they would. But they can choose to do it on their own without your.
Well, that was his concern. He was saying, no matter what this council does.
But that was in existence a whole lot, that's been in existence for forever.
Okay.
Not forever, but you know what I
Hopefully
mean.
he's watching, because he's
That
not
was,
here tonight.
that authority, this is the way that good old lawyers who aren't that smart, because most city attorneys, contrary to popular belief, aren't that smart. The Gold Dome can do whatever the Gold
Right.
Dome wants to do. That's the short rule that y'all need to always keep in your mind. That's not being rude towards local control, but if the Gold Dome passes local legislation dictating a tax measure or anything else, that's what y'all are bound by. So that has been around for a lot longer than House Bill 581. If your local legislation passes what's called a local act to address either a City of Loganville homestead exemption or a Walton County homestead exemption and it passes voter referendum, then it is what it is. It's in place. Has nothing to do with House Bill 581.
Well, you think we ask a lot of questions? There was a whole scenario presented to me of what if, and I'm like, dude, I have no clue.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
hopefully he's watching.
But
and-
basically,
and-
that's the $5,000 thing that y'all
Okay.
are talking about.
All right, thank you.
So just to summarize, so this is for the audience, if the city council chooses to opt out, nothing changes, nothing goes away, is the same as it has been. The county tax assessor will continue to assess the properties. You will continue to have an option to roll back the taxes of that reassessed value or not. If you choose not to roll back the millage rate, then it would more than likely produce a tax increase, which we'd be doing the same thing we're doing now with 3 more public hearings. Like I said, since 2018, we have chose to roll back taxes because of the assessment value. And just so everyone knows how that works, when the digest comes to us, the county says this is your X number for reassessed value. That number has to be reduced by X on the millage rate to offset it. So that's what the rollback is. There's 2 rollbacks. There's a lost rollback for local option sales tax, and there's a millage rollback for reassessed value. The county calculates that for us. If we choose not to adopt their number, that is considered a tax increase, and then you would have to have 3 public hearings because you're ultimately producing more revenue based off that reassessed value than currently. That does not take into account new growth. It's only for current property that's reassessed that went up. So if they reassess and all the properties go down, then they will send me a number saying your millage rate should be more now because you need to produce the same amount. That's when you could adopt that number or not adopt that number. That's how the millage versus assessments work. So all property is assessed by the county tax commissioner, whichever county they live in, Walton or Gwinnett. It's not done by the city. We receive the digest. We put our millage rate in there based on the numbers, and then we come before y'all to adopt the millage rate. And that's typically done in July, August, because we don't get the digest until July, after we've already done our budget. So I always use the current millage rate when I do the budget. That number could change depending on the digest.
Just so these folks will know, is our current millage rate the highest it's ever been?
No, it's the lowest, at least for the last, I have to go back and look, but since the 90s, I would say. Typically, it's been around 10 mils. We're right at 9.863, I think, for Walton, and 8.832 for Gwinnett. So that's really all I have as far as the public hearing. You have any questions for the mayor and council before we open up to the public? Okay.
Okay. If there's anyone here who would like to speak about the HB Bill 581, please feel free to come up. We need for you to state your name and your address, please, and you have 3 minutes.
Teacher says don't get ahead.
I'm just counting pages.
George Kelichek, Rockdale County, also a citizen of the state of Georgia. In front of you, HB 581 was to give relief to the homestead properties throughout this great state of Georgia. You have to make a decision. There's 24,085 homestead properties in this county. Remember, this is a decision for the county, the school system, and the city. Don't look at it as a separate silo, please. Since in the last 5 years, if you live in the city of Loganville and pay county and school tax, your net tax increase has gone up 138%, while Social Security has gone up 21.6%. You have to remember, by 2050, over 40% of Georgians will be in over 55 years of age. So let us look at it this way. Did you know there's 3,574 citizens that are disabled in this county? 5,618 families below the poverty level? 6,522 families receive food stamps and SNAP benefits? 8,717 children only have one parent in the household. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to remember, these students are only in school for 7 hours. Where are they the other 17? This is why HB 581 was developed, is we have to provide good water, good food, and good homes. Have you looked at the number of foreclosures and the number of homes that have gone to tax sales this year or years previous? Did you know your population was going to grow 49% by 2060? That's 1,617 students a year, or 617 students per year. Over 1 million Georgians, or 10% of our population, faces food insecurity every day. 80 million Americans are taking care of elders and children in their household. 33% of working Americans have a side hustle just to afford daily living essential items. So please, don't look at this as a silo. I'll be at the county BOC meeting or BOE meeting tomorrow night, speaking with them. Take the opportunity to slow down, research this information. You've got all of it there. I'll be here for the rest of the meeting. If you have any questions, 770-597-4878. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. Okay, is there anyone else? Anyone else like to have their 3 minutes? Okay, seeing none, we will close this public hearing. And as of now, the public hearing is closed, and we'll move into the regular work session for